Hi, Julie. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm all
I
right.
just wanted
Good to
to
see you.
make sure my volume was on and that you could hear me. So
No, it's
that's a relief
on.
for me. And I can share my screen, hey?
Yeah, maybe you can just try. I've made you a panelist so that should enable you to share.
It's disabled.
It's disabled.
Yeah.
Let me just see. Let me just try and sort that out.
Okay.
Can you try again? Is it still disabled?
Host disabled.
That is strange. Okay, I've changed something in the settings.
I think I'm in.
You are able to write?
Okay, let me just quickly see. There I am.
Yeah, I can see your screen.
Okay, great. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Help sharing. Okay, well done. It's going smoothly.
Yeah, you should think it should be fine.
Okay.
Afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon, Sachaba. How are you?
Well, thanks, and you?
All right.
Hi.
Hi, Julie. Great. Thanks, Julie. I got your message with the updated version of the
Fifth updated
presentation.
version.
Nice.
But we've worked out I can share my screen, so I don't think you'll need it, but just in case.
Okay. Hi, Ian. Please go ahead. Osborne, I think we may need to just give Ian panelist access. Yeah, there. I've just done it. Promote to panelist.
Okay. Thanks.
Hi, Ian.
Yep, that did it. Great.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
I can share my screen, okay.
Mhm.
That's just the link. You can see that okay?
Yes, we can see that.
Just check what happens when I do the slideshow. You can see that
Perfect.
first slide, okay?
Yep.
Yeah, great.
It's perfect. It's on full screen mode. Great. So thank you both. I mean, we'll do formal introductions, but Ian, I'd like to introduce you to Julie from the DBSA.
Hi,
Julie,
Julie.
please meet Ian from Earth Blocks.
Nice to meet you, Ian.
Yeah. Where are you, Julie, at the moment?
I'm in Joburg. I'm at the Development Bank.
Right.
So by virtue that you're taking off your jersey, where does that place you?
No, I have to be it's my branded T-shirt. If I put it on, I have to take the jumper off. But I'm in Edinburgh.
Oh, lovely.
It's very sunny, but it's chilly today.
It's hot here too. It's unnaturally hot for this time of year here too.
And you're speaking first, is that right?
Yes, so the order of events will be Julie. So we'll start with an intro from the ANCA head, and then delve into Julie's presentation, and then you will then come after that, Ian.
Okay, thank you.
So Shaba, my presentation when I talk to it is 20 minutes.
Yes, so we've also got a buffer in case it goes slightly over, so by 5 minutes. And Ian, as I'd aligned with you as well, similar, so yours will be more to 25 minutes. Great. Hosbon, do you know if Dorothy will be joining a bit early as well?
Let me just check with her.
Okay, thank you.
Pia alikuwa anataka kutafuta Gerald.
So Chaba, Dorothy is just joining, huh?
Okay, thanks, Hosbon. I'll give a panelist access as well as soon as she joins.
She's just joined. I am, yeah, made her panelist.
Okay. Hi, Dorothy.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, thanks, and you?
Good. Hi, Julie. Hi, Julie.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. Hi, Ian.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you all. I see we're at the top of the hour, so we can officially get underway. Good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you are in the world. And welcome to today's webinar, which really touches on nature data sources and really looks to elaborate on the relevance and context within Africa. We are excited to have two guest speakers presenting. We have Julie from the DBSA and then Ian from Earthblocks. But what I'll do is I'll be moderating the session. We will start off with welcome and introductions by the head of the ANCA Secretariat, Ms. Dorothy Maseke, and then we'll move on to a number of items, starting with more about ANCA, placing the launch of the working group in context, a view of how the working groups themselves will operate, and specifically how the Nature Data Sources Working Group will operate. And then we're excited to have presentations by the DBSA and Earthblocks. But in between that, we will be just sharing a few insights from a review of the African nature-related data landscape that ANCA produced over the last few months. And then we'll close off with next steps to just chart the way forward. So really excited, and thank you for joining. Dorothy, over to you just for welcome and introductions. I'm just hoping that we can have all of the panelists introduce themselves, along with, of course, yourself and Hosborn from the ANCA Secretariat. Thank you, Dorothy.
Thank you, Sechaba. And as you said, good afternoon, good morning, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you are at. I am seeing our panelists on the call, so possibly ask for a quick intro. You could just unmute and introduce yourselves, and then we'll move on to the next slide.
Hi, I am Julie Clark from the Development Bank of Southern Africa.
Hi, my name's Ian Woodhouse. I'm a professor at the University of Edinburgh, but today I'm here as Earthblocks.
Great. We have quite, a panel of speakers. Hosborn, please go ahead.
Thanks, Dorothy, and hello, everybody. Hosborn Omukoya, the manager for FSD Africa's Nature Program. Yeah.
Great, so we can proceed. So my name is Dorothy Maseke. I'm the head of the African Natural Capital Alliance, and I'll talk about the alliance in a few minutes. But I also am the Nature Finance and TNFD lead at FSD Africa. So just as a brief, FSD Africa is a specialist development agency funded by the UK government, and the nature program specifically is funded by, DEFRA, which is one of the departments within the UK government. And we have a number of initiatives that we are running under the nature program, including, what I'll speak about in the next slide. So speaking about ANCA specifically, so ANCA as an entity, we are focused on financial policy making and the whole aspect of integrating nature into business, and thereby at the end creating an African voice on nature. So we have a number of projects or a number of sub projects that we work on, but the whole our mission is basically that we want to catalyze nature positive African economies that is enabled by a financial sector that actually understands and acts on nature related risks and opportunities. And I believe many of you on the call are, are coming from the financial sector, either as banks, insurance companies, fund managers. And I know on the call, we also have some, development agencies, some project developers, etc. But ANCA, our mission is basically working towards nature positive African economies within, the financial sector. So what are our outcomes? On the slide, you can see 3 of them. So the first one is on financial regulation and policy making. And I won't go into too much detail because I want to give our panelists as much time as possible. to go through their sections. But here we have, we are working towards financial sector regulations, and what we are doing under this particular bucket is we are supporting a number of regulators develop their roadmaps, nature roadmaps. So we already have on board a number of regulators that we are working on across the African continent. We are also supporting governments, 5 governments in developing national nature strategies. And of course, disclosure, and many of you on the call are also part of our disclosure work, which is basically, work that we are doing on TNFD, which is a task force on nature-related financial disclosures, where we are running, a pilot that actually currently has 21 institutions representing 8 African countries. The integration of nature into business is also key. And so just very quickly, our key agenda, key focus, we have those 4, the strategy and governance, this disclosure, which I've talked about, there's nature-based solutions. So we are really, really working on supporting organizations to pilot and scale nature-based solutions, basically redirect capital into NBS. And I just want to mention on your last slide, you can see there's something about data. And that is, the real reason why we are here today, just making sure that data is accessible, available, and usable by all institutions that need to report and actually need to develop products and solutions. And then the third one is an African voice. Just making sure all African stakeholders are actively participating in the global nature agenda. I mean, we have been invited to sit at the table at the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. We have been invited to be part of the Nature Positive Initiative. As you know, many of you on the call are working with, we are supporting
Apologies, I think we may have lost Dorothy temporarily. So as we wait for her to rejoin, I think the point she was making was ANCA has been invited to participate in conversations globally as part of a number of initiatives and forums. She had cited the Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, amongst others. So ANCA's positioning as an African voice on nature is really increasing in its prominence globally. And as you can see on this slide, sorry, Dorothy, we just lost you for a second.
Sorry. The network does this when it's a very important call. But anyway, thanks for standing in for me. So basically, we engage our members through a number of ways. So the first one is roadshows. We've held large public events both in Kenya and Johannesburg in the past. And of course, we are looking to continuing on this. We are hosting webinars such as today. We have supported the development of a number of thought leadership pieces, part of which is going to be spoken about today by one of our members. And then, of course, we have the Knowledge Center, which is the website that has a number of resources that I'd encourage you to go to if at all you've not accessed the website. And we have our quarterly newsletter, and this newsletter specifically has been getting contributions from ANCA members, and we continuously invite you to submit articles. Actually, there's a call for articles now, because we want to, release the next newsletter. Any story that you have, any showcase piece of work that you want to, give to us and share with other ANCA members, you're welcome to participate. We actually have a PR agency on board that will support you, that would also help you document these thoughts in case you're not able to put them down after having a meeting with them, and we'll have, your articles ready. Next slide, please. So this working group is basically, the working group we're launching today is basically one of the working groups to make, targeted contribution towards the delivery of ANCA's strategy. And basically the purpose of working groups is that we want to involve as many ANCA members as possible. Apart from that, we are also getting many requests where ANCA members want to participate. They want to be engaged. They want to drive the agenda of certain aspects that they feel, are key pressure point to them, and they want to look for solutions. And as a secretariat, we're here to serve you. And what we have done then is put these working groups together. Next slide, please. So this will be the fourth working group. We had our ANCA communications working group. I know a number of you are members. There's the TNFD adoption working group, which is helping define the roadmap towards the first nature disclosure. We have commercial opportunities. This was launched in January, also received quite a bit of excitement. And this is about, skin in the game, money on the table, products and solutions. And then today we are launching a nature data sources working group. And what we want to do, this working group, and I'll speak about it in a few, we want to create a baseline towards the standardization and scaling of nature-related data across African financial institutions. The last working group, which we hope to launch in about a month, is a regulatory engagement working group. And here, this working group will specifically largely be made up of regulators, policy makers who are working towards, the nature, working towards the nature agenda. And just specifically, why are we setting up the nature data sources working group? Ladies and gentlemen, we all realize the critical role of nature data. And we all realize there are numerous gaps, and I won't talk about the gaps because Julie and Earth Blocks and Sechaba will also talk about it. But then this working group is, we aim to have this working group collaborate with a number of stakeholders, government agencies responsible for data collection, research institutions and universities. And thankfully, we have Professor with us today. We have Earth Blocks with us today. NGOs that are leading on biodiversity conservation efforts. We realize that these NGOs have quite a lot of data. And how can we leverage on this data? And then private sector actors who are committed towards sustainable development. And the working group, therefore, what we aim to do is basically to identify existing data sources and assess their accessibility, their quality, based, of course, on the challenges that, you're facing. And then, advocate for a number of possibly standardized data collection methodologies. Again, these are learnings that we'll be sharing with you from the white paper and the work that we've done in the past. The working group, again, is to support on capacity building, especially when it comes to data management and analysis across or within African institutions. And then there's a big dream, which is basically to solve the data challenge in terms of developing, some sort of, criteria or some sort of platform, of course, without reinventing the wheel. And that's part of the reason why we are speaking to and bringing on board some data experts who will understand our challenges, and then we can see how to work together going forward. Again, this is in line of many global efforts that are taking place in terms of nature data. So with that, I want to hand it over to the next speaker. The next couple of maybe an hour or so, we are going to deep dive into a number of topics on data. Thank you so much, Sechaba, for hosting.
Thank you, Dorothy. It's exciting to see what ANCA stands for, mission, outcomes, and all of the initiatives. So we're actually, very happy to announce that one of our speakers this afternoon, being the Development Bank of Southern Africa, has a report that was commissioned by ANCA and co-authored by the DBSA and Oliver Wyman, that is officially available for download today. So I've shared a link in the chat box. And with that being said, it's a great opportunity to segue into the next sort of section, which is a presentation by the DBSA that really seeks to outline the key insights from this publication and of course, try and bring out the practical applications so that all of the institutions that are present in this conversation can start to, see how this can play out more practically in their individual context. So I will share my screen. Please just let me know once you're able to see it. And Julie, in the meantime, please unmute and share your video. I will hand it over to you now. Please just let me know when you want me to move from slide to slide. Thank you, Julie. Over to you.
Thank you, Sishava. Thank you, ANCA. Thank you, FSD, and everybody on this call today. It's a great pleasure to present to you some parts of our learnings, of our journey. Next slide. So I've broken the presentation down into a few sections. So the very first section is just giving you some contextual background to a little bit of our story, because it's a bit of a theme that goes throughout this presentation. I think most financial institutions have got pillars on which they are building their biodiversity story on, to try and get more responsive and reactive to the biodiversity crisis that we are handling. And ours is that we have these four main pillars, which is a roadmap and a strategic approach to biodiversity. And then in the grey block is our instruments and our financial mechanisms. And everybody's familiar with investing in enabling environments and mainstreaming biodiversity better into our businesses, so that whatever we do, we are building biodiversity rather than depleting biodiversity. And finally, how we're reporting and quantifying our targets and disclosing on these. But all of this cannot happen without the power of partnerships. And that is a serious lesson that we have learned. It is through partnerships that we've built our capacity up. And then without knowledge sharing, again, those partnerships become meaningless. So that is where we are. But we've also learned something, that every bank has weaknesses in these pillars. And it's good to focus on the pillar that's the weakest and build that up, so that you don't overshoot one pillar whilst another one is just holding back the actual impact you can have. So it's keeping an eye on all of the pillars as we move forward. Next. So I wanted to just emphasize before we move on that we had very powerful partnerships with these players, and there were many others, but for the purpose of this presentation, these were the key players that really helped see us through our journey and took us by the hand. And hopefully we also gave something back, because it was giving and receiving all the way. But we're really grateful to these particular partnerships, and you'll see more as we go. I also learned, and we learned, that at the early stage to an advanced practice in biodiversity management and opportunity seeking, that no bank is really all at an advanced practice stage or at an early stage. We are all at different phases and stages in different aspects and elements. So we don't have to be ashamed of where our bank is currently, because somewhere you're leading the pack, and finding out where you're leading the pack and sharing your stories with the rest of us really helps. And that's what really helped our journey, was banks that were willing, who weren't perfect, but were willing to share with us their lessons learned. So hopefully I'm doing the same today. Next. I wanted to very much share this little story with you as part of our context. 7 years ago, we embarked on a journey with our South African Biodiversity Institute, and we worked through a JEF facility with them to look at an ecological infrastructure for water security program. And it started many years ago, and it had several components to it. But the component one that seemed like a little bit more of a preamble to the rest, less of what we would be investing in, was the part that dealt with policy, data collection, particularly, and this is the point to stress, particularly looking at how can you map biodiversity, and then looking at financial mechanisms. And we never knew how valuable that investment would be in terms of looking at the granularity of data for South Africa in terms of its catchments, its biodiversity and ecosystem service data bank. And that was to pay huge dividends back to DBSA many years later. And it was just a story I wanted to tell you, because we always hear invest in the enabling environment, but very rarely do we find the chance to. But when we find a chance to, it really pays us well in multiple ways for multiple years to come. So seeking these databases around Africa, these existing tools, and building on them and helping generate a policy enabling environment is a very good investment for any kind of finance institution. So that was the point I wanted to make, but you'll see the theme as I go throughout the presentation. The final point I wanted to make under this section is that, that's the next slide, okay, is that we also are in the business of mainstreaming, all of us, and we've all been doing it. We've been doing it by ensuring that everything we find is legally correct. We've been ensuring that our safeguards are applied. But we all know this isn't enough, because this hasn't worked for biodiversity. Biodiversity is still being depleted by our transactions. We've got to do far more. And so what is this far more? What is this transformative change that we can make? And I just put a little picture here. It's a little bit of a negative picture, but it was a beautiful case study that we went to see of how communities and donors were impacting on a catchment, how they were fixing their dongas, how they're repairing and restoring nature to improve their livelihoods. It was perfect. It was a perfect case study, inspiring in every regard. But coming away from that little community, we were using this road, and this road was really badly constructed and designed and managed, and it was destroying this catchment. It was destroying the future of those communities in terms of what it was doing to degrading the environment. And we as financiers applying safeguards and applying this and doing that, it's not enough just to make sure our own roads are green and responsible. We have to make sure that the way we present our programs and projects and investments inspires others that are also financing similar infrastructure to do the right thing. And if we can do that, then we're far more than just influencing our own road programs. We are influencing the way roads are thought through and planned and implemented across landscapes and how they impact on livelihoods. So instead of helping this community, this road was probably really a disadvantage to them in a few years' time. So that is just how transformative change has to work in banks and society as a whole. And then going on in conclusion to this complete section of how we came to this context is we were really inspired by the Global Biodiversity Framework and the TNFD LEAP approach. And what really inspired us was not to be shy, to try and locate, evaluate, assess, and prepare what you actually can do, what is material to you, and also what is a low-hanging fruit to you, because we've all got our entry points where we think we can quickly make an impact, and find those and enter on those, and don't be shy if it's only a little bit. A little bit is better than nothing, or saying the whole thing is so daunting, we'll never get this through our banks. But just going where you can go and trying to find the most influential entry point is fantastic. And then the next year you can build on it. And that was the power of the LEAP approach. And so I just wanted to emphasize that. And then have a breathing space at the next slide, which, before we go into the methodology and challenges, just to ask if there's any points of clarification, or if anybody wants to just add something to that first contextual introduction.
We haven't noted any questions yet, Julie. I'll just keep note of them as we go through the sections and share them. Thank you.
Okay, so based on that foundation of where we sort of came from, the next slide will look at, or the next set of slides looks at 4 challenges we faced. So the first challenge was getting the tools. Are there tools out there that would be useful to us, or are they just too general, or is the data not granular enough? Can we really use these tools? Are they just too complex for us? And this was a wonderful discovery, because we discovered that actually these tools were just made for us. They are so good. And the granularity that we could get from South African tools was just enough for us to make the points we needed to make, and turn the ship around where we needed to turn the ship around, and point us in the right direction when we needed to point north. So these tools were simpler than we thought, and we had so much support from the tool makers. I'm just referring particularly to the WWF, Water and Biodiversity Risk Filter. How much support that team of people gave us was superb. And the Encore tool also gave us superb support. And that was enough to set us on the road. So the next challenge. or actually there's a little bit of detail on this one. If you can go back, I wanted to just show you graphically what these tools do for you. So those who are not familiar with them can see, but this was just showing water scarcity. If we continued in the current trend 2050, if we went on to the pessimistic, or if we went on to the area of change, that's showing us if we've got a project plonked in this particular municipality in this country, we must be prepared for a very different scenario to the one we're currently working in, where it's sort of showing redder and hotter. So that's just an example of water scarcity, but there are maps of everything you could name in terms of ecosystem service degradation or drought or fire risk and so on. I just put that up as an example of it so that you could see what the toolkits kind of looked like. So the next slide is going on to how we can juxtapose these biodiversity and water maps with economics, with macroeconomics and social data. And from that, you can see areas that are particularly hot, and in terms of, not hot in terms of climate, but hot in terms of risk. So if you have clients operative in these kind of areas, just be careful for your clients, because they're going to face surface water difficulties. And are they prepared for that? And that could impact on your loan. So I just wanted to point that out. Moving on. So the next challenge we faced was some of the tools when we started with them, they weren't like very user-friendly. I remember the ANCA tool when it began, it was 1,000 clicks, and we just didn't have the time or the resources for 1,000 clicks. But we stuck with them and they stuck with us, and they really helped us to assess our corporate risk and our whole loan book from a very high level top view. And that was super helpful for us because we could make quick points for management. And in fact, it was projects like this ANCA tool that could help us to get the Jeff project with Sandy. So that's how they feed off one another. And our key lesson learned with ANCA is ANCA became stronger and stronger as the years went by. And we were really proud of what they could achieve, but we saw it in action when the AFD and SANBI joined forces, and they looked at a macroeconomic study of South Africa, and they looked at all sectors, including the finance sector. So I put a little reference in here of this report, which everybody needs to read, because it's so powerful in how you can use an environmental tool and how you can analyze a sector. And so we have a lot to thank SANBI and AFD for that macro study on nature risks and nature opportunities at a national level. And then the next slide shows us how we used ANCA in DBSA to put messages across to our own organization. So unfortunately, this slide should have been animated, but it isn't showing animation. But over here, if you look at this top deck of pink, that was showing how a third of our loan book was at risk just from these 3 ecosystem services. And these ecosystem services needed these habitats and these natural capital assets to be sustained, because these assets were delivering these services. But there were drivers of change out there that were affecting those habitats, and therefore these ecosystem services on which our whole loan book depended on. So this was a way that we could show management that we really need to be, if you look at that 1, 2, and 3 in the left-hand side, we really need to be more aware. We need to discover unseen material risks. We need to be able to articulate them better. We need to work from scientific language into financial language, and we need to bridge that gap. And the ANCA tool does that beautifully, because we could now say, this is, if you look at the bottom section of this chart, these are the drivers of environmental change. And this is leading to creditworthiness of financial institutions. And this is the nature of how these ecosystem services and capital assets are impacting on our credit risk, or the credit risk of our, or the financial situation of our clients, and how that is affecting their credit risk. And once we could show and talk the crossover language, we were developing in DBSA and in the scientific community a common language that we had severely lacked before. Next slide. We could take the AFD study, and we could take that macro study and we could apply it down to DBSA. That macro study dealt with the finance sector, and we took that and we said, okay, now, particularly in DBSA, and we applied it to DBSA with a heat map On the right-hand side, we looked at the ecosystem services, and underneath we looked at DBSA activities that we primarily fund. And we came up, again, hard-hitting story, same theme. It's water, water, water that is impacting on our loan book. Going forward, we have to be far more aware of that risk and manage it far more carefully, especially because as DBSA, we want to be with poor people. We want to be where they are at risk in catchments that are either flooding or under drought risk or fire risk. We want to work with them and we want to help them, but we must be aware if we're doing that, what are the risks and what are we doing about those long-term risks? Next slide. So the third challenge was looking at a lot of our projects, and I think many finance institutions will feel the same. They cross catchments. They are scattered. It could be solar panels on rooftops across a whole country. It could be a transmission line that crosses 3 countries. And they go through some sensitive habitats and some not high-risk habitats. And so how do you now map these onto your loan book? It's a complex question, and we try to simplify it into an easy answer. So the next slide shows that there are, if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, and ignore the orange things for now, the simple geolocation points are what is the physical risk of our loan book, what is the regulatory risk, and what is the reputational risk. And then we want to count all the projects that are undergoing physical high risk. How much of our loan book is that, and what is the percentage of the total loan book? That's what we were trying to achieve. And once we had that kind of Excel spreadsheet showing us that 40% or whatever percentage of our projects are at physical risk of water scarcity, for example, we could now start analyzing it and seeing what we could do about it. We could now really define a detailed roadmap, a detailed integrated biodiversity framework, detailed indicators and targets, better toolkits, better financial instruments and mechanisms, redefine our roles and responsibilities across our organization, because it's not just an ESG function, it's all of us in this together. So that was what we wanted to arrive at. But to get there was a little bit of a challenge with these complex projects that were cross regions or scattered. So we tried the simple one geolocation point. It didn't work. We redid the whole loan book again, according to a 20% rule. If a project fell with 20% of it physically into a sensitive or risky area, we counted the whole loan as risk. And it didn't work. And so then we used a third method, which we found happiness with. It was how our environmental analysts have to do this analysis felt comfortable with. And that's on the next slide. So this risk, or this risk tool, looked at, if you look at the orange block, it looked at take the project and geolocate it into maybe a few geolocation points, as minimum as possible, and see how much of the loan is proportionate to that, like 20% is in geolocation point 1, which represents most of other possible points we could have chosen, and geolocation point 2 represents 80% of the physical location of this project. And then that was the first round. Now the tool kicks in and the tool says to the analyst, well, what kind of mitigation measures are there in place? What's the capacity like of the key role players? What are the conditionalities of that loan in those risk areas? And they think about that and rate those according to a score that is quite tightly defined. And then they go on into the light blue column where they say, well, what is the impact? Is it positive or negative on biodiversity? And then they go on to the next column, which says, bearing in mind all of that, what is the overall significance of this risk in these geolocation points? And can you simplify them into maybe 1, 2, or 3 points and proportion them according to that risk? So an analyst might say only 5% of this project goes through a sensitive area, but it's a tropical forest and it's a significant trade-off. So therefore, we're going to say 100% of this loan is high risk for that reason, or high negative impact for that reason. So they are able now to use a little bit of their analysis, their own analysis, but in a structured way, and give an explanation down at the bottom here of why they have located that project in these geolocation points and how much financial risk they have proportion to it, if it's 100% or if it's 5% to each type of geolocation point. But we are all going through the same thinking process to arrive at a conclusion. And if anybody picks up on that project as a second phase 10 years down the line, they can go back and revisit this analyst's particular thinking process. So that was a tool within a tool, because we have a big toolbox, but that was just one tool to help with complex projects. So I just thought I'd share that with you. So moving on now, the final challenge is we really want inclusivity, because biodiversity is absolutely only going to work if everybody is involved in it and everybody has a stake, because it's everybody's basic human right. And so it has to work not from a top-down, just macroeconomic perspective, as we just showed through like the ANCA tool, but it has to work and be meaningful from the bottom up too. So we had a project, next slide, that showed how this could work. And we're excited about this project. eThekwini municipality in South Africa is really in a transformative phase of understanding how catchments and river systems work and working with communities. And they started an EnviroChamps model. And we were funding a huge aqueduct. It was really one of the most expensive investments a municipality could undergo in this country. And it was an intertransfer scheme of water. It was big across sensitive areas. And we said, over and above safeguards, over and above the law, we need to do much more for this. So 5% of our loan was allocated towards an initiative to support this transformative river system and to look at, on this little catchment, which was a palm meet, how could EnviroChamps engage in this river system and monitor the spills from the sewages, which is a big issue in this country, or the illegal, deliberate spills of industry, or identify other issues that were cropping up, and how could they partner with the municipality for a more rapid response rate. And in so doing, also keep an eye on monitoring the quality of water in that river system. And the methodology with these EnviroChamps was just so beautiful. And it could be a whole hour talk on its own, but it can't be here. But it was just to give it a mention, because the whole obvious point of this is communities play such an incredibly valuable and under-optimized role on all infrastructure projects. And if we did this correctly as a country, they would give inputs into all financial agencies' development results frameworks, like what are our indicators, how do we measure our project success, and communities could have a substantial role in that. And then that could be aggregated up, so that by the time you're analyzing your loan book, not just from top-down economics, but also from bottom-up, how people are feeling it on the ground, then you're really playing the spectrum, and then you can really have impact, because then communities are part of designing, monitoring, reviewing, and targeting in a whole way a corporate bank might look at and view nature. So moving on to the final breathing space right now is the results. What did all this mean to us? And just before I go on to that, if there's anybody who's said anything in the chat, because I'm not reading the chat, but if you want to chip in now before I mention results, it's a chance.
Nothing as yet, Julie. We're
Okay.
keeping a close eye on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so when we now looked at the results, we had something concrete to share to management. Before, we were always just saying to management, it's important, and they know it's important, but you need something concrete. So next slide shows the kind of concrete results. We could tell management, we looked at it, and surprise, surprise, these are our high-risk clients. Surprise, surprise, these are high-risk sectors and regions. Things we thought were high risk weren't as actually high risk as we thought, and other way around. We could show a few nice new things to at least think about. And then we could look at who are high potential clients, sectors, partnerships, and policy and practice applications. Where could we target based on all of this information that was now easily accessible and available? We could show who were the key role players and how much more they could be doing than they were doing before. And also, surprise, surprise, it didn't need to be so much in this unit. It could be that unit. And all of these things started happening once we could produce metrics. And then also the institutional arrangements. We found that to be a real big issue in the bank. And we fortunately were blessed by an ESG manager who just could take that ball and roll with it. And that was empowering the bank as a whole so that everybody could relate and everybody could integrate, because biodiversity is not a standalone. It is very integrated into our whole strategic framework approach. So that is what started happening in the organization. But it was so important. We were underpinning it with some science and some metrics. So the next slide shows the various ways we could represent this to management and to the units in the bank, who all have to now include it in the way they do business. So one way that people can really understand things is to look at it from a graphical picture point of view. So I just blocked out some of the things so it's not so, because this thing hasn't yet gone. In fact, it's going through management as I'm talking to you now. But I just wanted to show how sometimes it's nice to put it on a map. And each of these little white dots represents many projects. They're too many to put all the projects on a map, because then they get all clustered, like you can see it on the left-hand side. But what we can really do is, if somebody's interested in what about eThekwini, we can click on the white dot in eThekwini and we can say, those are the 100 projects we've got there, and this is the level of risk. And you can see under this particular drought frequency thing, it's showing quite hot. But flooding might show even hotter, because I'm just showing you a drought frequency probability. But from that, that's an example of one. You can aggregate up. So the next slide is an aggregation. So the next slide looks at physical risk. And our physical risk could be drought plus flooding plus ecosystem service degradation and so on. It could be multiple things that comprise what is physical risk to our loan book. So we could, if management wanted to know where was the flood risk, we could show it. But if they wanted to know where was the flood plus risk, we could show it. If they wanted to know where was the reputational risk, we could show it. And the regulatory risk, we could show it. So we could show it in different maps, and we could give different levels of detail for whatever it wanted. We could show it for sectors. We could show it for areas. We could show it for clients. Whatever it was particularly that we wanted to delve into, we now have a tool that just at a click of a button, it presents. Okay, so the next slide. Sometimes people don't like maps. There's certain map people, and then there's other people that are Excel people, and there's other people that are graph people. So for the graph people, we could present this kind of information in a graphic form. And this was like showing all the different risks going down on the left, and it was showing the percentage of our loan book under high risk. And now we could start comparing things a little bit easier. For example, we started noticing patterns, like where water scarcity is there, where water flooding is there, or water quality risks are there, so is social conflict on the up. And the more the resource has been degraded and there's more competition for it, the more the conflict, social conflict is increasing. The more social conflict increases, the more media scrutiny there is, and the more reputational risk there comes to be for any bank investing in that area. So that's another way to look at risk and to see how are we managing that, not just as a bank, but for the communities involved. If they're doing a really noble project, they're going to be up against a lot of resource competition, and there's going to be winners and losers. And as my friend Duncan Hay from the INR has taught me, water flows to the wealthy. It doesn't flow downhill. So you have to be careful as a bank that you're not aiding and abetting that process, but that you're actually looking at a scarce resource and you're really allocating it to those who need it most to meet their priority basic needs. And graphs like this show issues like that. So moving on. We have looked at another way of showing it, because people love scenarios, because scenarios are dynamic. So you can say, if you follow a business as usual scenario, this is where the risks are heading. This is how quickly our loan book is dissipating. Or if we follow an optimistic trend, we can pull this thing together and we can become less at risk. But this is what we have to do to win an optimistic scenario over. And so you can have a dynamic engagement with different units in the bank, or different managers, or internal or external players on how can we pull that curve. We refer to it in the bank as bend the arc of history. How can we push it down? What is our role? Where can we engage? Where can we have our entry points to really play a strategic impact for role? Next slide. That means we can start looking at paradigm shifts. Once we're in that game, we can start saying, what are our resources? What's our culture? What if we invested in the enabling environment? And this is where the chickens came home to roost, which is why I gave you the first slide, because this is where that SAMBI project became so precious to us, because it was investing in the enabling environment, which actually helped us analyze our loan book at the end of the day through water risk filter by the WWF, through ANCA, but they all use those SAMBI maps. And the rest of Africa needs that. It needs that so badly, because we find it more difficult to look at our risks in Africa because they don't have that same quality of data. But there are funders out there that can give it to Africa. And so I just wanted to emphasize that. And then there is the paradigm shift potential. So what? So what is all of this about? Have we really scaled up? Is it really replicable? Is it really sustainable? Have we really engaged in transformative change? But without that baseline case, we couldn't really have these kind of debates. They would always be philosophical, but now they're not. Now they're getting down to what is material. Last slide. And that brings me to the way forward. The way, or the second last slide, I should say, the way forward is really, how do we set our targets then to be more meaningful? And really in which areas would create that paradigm and transformative shift. And these are just some of ours. We've got many, but we are now in the process of working with units to see what is actually possible, what they can deliver, because this is business. This isn't an ESG function. This is a bank's business. How much can it place at risk? Where can it invest in? What is feasible and viable? And we as ESG unit can help the bank by producing metrics. But now the debates flow and the insight of all of these units that comprise the development bank all have a key role to play in helping us to develop, to design, and to see where we can have high impact. And the final slide is just taking you onto our journey on where this is heading now. Where are we going now with our way forward? We have recognized none of this data that I've given you is perfect. It is all flawed, but it's not fatally flawed. It's just sufficient enough to guide us in the right direction. It's sufficient enough to build the case. It's sufficient enough to have the debates, and it's sufficient enough to motivate and drive people to make the change. And then it's sufficient enough to integrate it with all the other things that we are doing in the bank, the climate strategy, the sustainable strategy, just transition, and it goes on and on. We have to integrate all of these things because they're all one and the same thing. So one can't race ahead of the other. And we have to manage, and we have to look for and seek opportunities for inclusivity so that the poor are engaged in this process, because in the end, we're trying to balance out the power of who controls resources and who has access to resources and who can help sustain these resources for future generations. Then we also have to look at how we can seek these business opportunities and do things better, mainstream better, find our partners better, look at different ways of financial tools. This is the 6 pillars I spoke about at the beginning, and share our knowledge, develop all of our partnerships, and all help hold each other accountable as we monitor and review if we're really having a meaningful impact at a scale and pace that is needed in order to save the countries, the catchments, and the people that we are working with, and who we can actually help in some small way. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We have one question from in the chat box from Joanne Dube, asking if you conducted biodiversity-related scenario planning.
That is the great challenge. So actually, we did everything very simply. We don't want to give an impression that everything was like really hard exercise. We did things because we found doing things simply helps. And if we look at biodiversity in Africa, it is very interlinked and follows very closely with the way what is happening with water, whether it's droughts, whether it's floods, whether it's extreme weather events. Biodiversity is integral to those kind of risks, fire risks, and so on. So because it is, we thought we could cheat a little bit and say the biodiversity or the water risk filter does the scenarios. And one of the key elements into this is what's happening with ecosystem service degradation. And that, coupled with water, really does give us biodiversity scenarios sufficient enough for DBSA to realize the extreme risk we are facing and how we can best manage it. And that is how we did it. So we used the biodiversity risk filter and the water risk filter. The biodiversity risk filter of WWF doesn't yet have scenarios, but the water risk filter does. But the coupling of these two, we found sufficient enough to say that the same areas would likely come up for both, and the same risks and the same clients. So we found that to be okay for round one. As things progress, we can always go into a more detailed round two.
Thank you, Julie. Some great, very insightful content. To thank you for that. To everyone else on the call, please do continue to share your questions in the chat box. We're just mindful of time, so I'll be sharing my screen again. Next, we have Earthblocks, who will be sharing information about the platform and a number of other insights. But we just wanted to sort of preface that with a view of outcomes from an ANCA study that was conducted last year that really sought to conduct a landscape review of the African continent, just to see what the state of access to data currently is, and then of course platforms such as Earthblocks have presented solutions that begin to address that. So I'm going to share my screen again and then just ask Velo, please just unmute and share your video, just to briefly take us through the study that ANCA conducted last year. Thank you.
Great. Good day, everyone. I'm excited to touch on the fascinating world of nature-related data within Africa as we explore the nature-related data landscape review within Africa. And just to give a bit of context, our journey begins with a clear need that was expressed. The need being that financial and non-financial institutions require accessible and usable nature-related data. And the TNFD pilot membership survey, as part of our TNFD pilot program in partnership with FSD Africa, emphasizes this need with, as you look on the left-hand side, 100% of respondents for the survey valuing data sources as a crucial part of their work. So what we did is we set out on a mission to understand the availability and coverage of nature-related data in Africa. And to achieve this, we assess factors like geographical coverage and data availability in 22 mainstream tools and sources. We also assessed country or region-specific data tools, platform, and ongoing research, for example, by different ministries of environment. As we move on to the next slide, we just have a brief view of the 22 mainstream data sources that we looked at. And then we can move on from there to look at our early findings. And some of them have revealed some intriguing insights. So starting off, we discovered that inconsistency exists across data sources in terms of taxonomy, which creates challenges for institutions, making it difficult to sort of piece together a comprehensive picture. We also noticed some geographical biases, with coverage leaning towards biodiversity hotspots and countries involved in significant sustainability initiatives with multiple conservation partners. And interestingly, some global data providers have started integrating nature data into their ESG tools. For example, with S&P's Sustainable One or MSCI's biodiversity screening metrics or Refinitiv's sustainability tools. One of the views that we got from there is that the in-depth company biodiversity screenings on some of these major data providers mainly focus on larger institutions, some listed and some private. And this unfortunately does often result in smaller institutions not receiving the same level of data attention. Additionally, while geospatial data covers Africa's diverse biomes, it often does not have the specificity needed for company level analysis. And the insights or the key takeaways gathered in this review have helped us to form next steps in this journey, which we can see in the following slide. So as we move on, we have a set of conclusions and next steps from our journey. And one of the things that we are beginning to embrace or have started to embrace is the EU and TNFD taxonomies as our guiding stars, given their status as emerging industry guides. And we're looking to also delve deeper into the availability of data behind key metrics and work towards aggregating data sources into a robust platform to sort of reveal hidden gaps. One such platform that already is in existence and addressing these data gaps is a platform called Earthblocks. And we're fortunate to have Ian Woodhouse from Earthblocks with us today, and he'll be presenting more on this afterwards. Another factor that we found was that collaboration is key. So by joining forces with global data providers, we can expand nature-related data coverage in Africa for everyone's benefit. Engaging with countries from the top down will also help us in refining primary data and obtaining more accurate geospatial information. Our action plan also includes defining key metrics. We've specified 15 to 20 key metrics that we look to investigate, investigating data availability and identifying collaboration opportunities. We will also start integrating our nature data landscape review into all engagements, including the ANCA working groups, in particular the Nature Data Sources Working Group, which we are launching today. Thank you all for your attention. We've covered a lot of ground, and I'm sure you may have any questions or comments. Please could you put them in the chat and we'll address them at the end.
Thank you, Mvelo. And we're excited to have Ian from Earthblocks just to share information about Earthblocks as a platform, because it's an example of a data provider that aims to actually provide solutions to these challenges that have been identified. So Ian, over to you. We're really privileged to have you share your insights with us today. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Saba, for hosting this. Let me just get my slides up. Hopefully you can all see that.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you, Ian.
So good morning, good afternoon. My name's Ian Woodhouse. I'm one of the co-founders of Earthblocks, and I'm the head of knowledge and outreach. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through a handful of slides about Earthblocks and some of the examples of what we do and some of the rationale about why we created Earthblocks. And then I'm going to spend the second half actually showing you the platform and what it does so that you can see what it looks like. Now, what is Earthblocks? Earthblocks is one of these tools. We've been hearing a little bit about tools. Julie's talk was really interesting. They're talking about some of the tools that are available. Our tool is really trying to provide a structured way to organize and combine your data, perform the calculations that you need to do, and then create the visualizations and outputs that you need to share and report on. And the key thing is that you can do all of this in one place. Fundamentally, what's really exciting about Earthblocks is that it's a very transparent platform. You can lift up the hood and see all the engine working underneath, and I'm going to show you that later. But we consider that to be a fairly fundamental thing in this broader financial services context and things like TNFD, is that you want to be able to demonstrate that transparency to be able to show how it's working and be able to share that with other people. Now, the origins, one of the key things about Earthblocks is that there's a big team behind Earthblocks, and Geneviève Patenaude, our CEO, would have loved to have been here today, but of course she's in high demand everywhere. But collectively, our team, this is mostly the core sort of science team. We've got about 125 years of experience working with geospatial data. Geneviève and myself have been at the University of Edinburgh for a number of years before we moved into Earthblocks. And what we've tried to do with Earthblocks is take all of that expertise and combine it, and not provide it as a consultancy, but to actually embed it into a platform, so that the platform itself is articulates all of that expertise and knowledge in a way that makes it much easier for our users to actually access and process the geospatial data and make some sense of that. So what we're trying to do is lift everybody up so that you can stand on our shoulders and get over all of these hurdles that we're trying to get over. Now, this particular challenge, what is it we're trying to address here in terms of nature impacts? Why is it challenging? Well, we heard a little bit from Nvelo there about some of the challenges involved. But there's lots of regulatory requirements coming online. A lot of them are complex. Many of them are evolving and changing. And the regulations that we might have to meet right now might change and modify, or they may be different for different locations around the world, because every interaction with nature is going to be different. Company footprints are different, environmental conditions. And of course, that's one of the key things about these global data sets, is that often these global data sets can be very good on average everywhere, but sometimes not so good, very specific locations. So it's important that you've got a very clear context in which any of these data sets are used, and a way to actually verify and ensure that they're appropriate for your the local area as well as the global scenario. That idea of just accessing and integrating data. So on the list that we just saw, one of the challenges being combining data. That's one of the things that we set up Earthblocks to try to do, is to be a data aggregator. So almost like one of your streaming services, like Netflix, is that it's a mechanism by which to draw in activity and products that have been produced by other people, but bringing it together into one place so that it's much easier for you to actually access it. And that demand for skilled professionals. So Dorothy was talking about capacity building, and that's one of the key things that we see here, is that the Earthblocks had to be something that was easy to use. And what we talk about, we use this from the terminology that MIT have used in the past, having a low floor and a high ceiling. So I'll show some examples of that when I look at the product. The low floor meaning that you don't need a degree in satellite data analysis to be able to start using Earthblocks. You can go in at a very low technical level, but it has a high ceiling, meaning that you can actually elaborate on that, and you can build on it, and you can do quite elaborate and technical things once you've got used to the interface. Or if somebody comes with a bit more skills, they can build on it and do something quite elaborate. And I'll show you a couple of examples of that when I look at the demo. And the challenge with internet access and local desktop and software, and it makes it limited to scale. So we built Earthblocks on a cloud-based platform. We're partners with Google Cloud. We're very much using the Google Cloud and their massive supercomputers to run the processing. So a relatively low bandwidth connection still allows you to use Earthblocks, because you're not downloading any of the data locally. You're not doing any of the processing locally. You're only downloading the outputs, and that might simply be tables or graphs. So we like what our ambition is to put Earthblocks really as that cornerstone that supports a lot of these activities, being able to be ready to deliver on reporting metrics, being able to scale it so you can do not just one particular asset or a region, but you can expand that to thousands or even millions of assets. We believe it's an authoritative climate and nature data, because we vet all the data that we put on the platform, and we make sure that there's a very clear transparency of that data in terms of its legacy and where it's come from. We mostly put data sets on Earthblocks, or make available through Earthblocks, when it has a peer review paper that backs it up, so that it is not so that it's got some good scientific credibility behind that. And we make sure that there's the links available to actually follow through where the data comes from. And it's very customizable, so everything is modifiable by the user. We don't provide we provide templates and ways to get started, but ultimately we want the user to be able to incorporate their knowledge and build on our technical knowledge for the geospatial, but build on their specific domain knowledge to customize the analytics for exactly what it is they need to do. So all the data you need in one place, that's part of the ambition of EarthBlocks, is to be a data aggregator. So you can bring in data. Much of it is either satellite data directly, or it's derived products from satellite data. So the deforestation map there, for example, and this is across an entire country, by the way, I think this is, I think, Cambodia, is that we can collect data that has been processed originally from satellite data, but it generates a product like a deforestation product. But other data, like the population data, comes from other sources. The WRI flood data or the JRC surface water data, for example, comes from data products that are not necessarily based on satellite data. And there is climate data. So we've got historic climate data going back about 40 years, but we also have the climate model projections. So you can choose different models or the different scenarios for the climate predictions, and so you can look into the future to estimate what the impacts are. So not just the past, but also the future. And I think it was Julie that was saying that not everybody likes maps. We're building a very strong API system now so that the results from EarthBlocks can feed directly into your existing systems. One of the things I'm particularly excited about is being able to incorporate the API into Excel spreadsheets, because everybody knows how to use a spreadsheet, and it makes sense in terms of generating the numbers. So this particular example here is soy plantations in South America. That's a latitude and longitude for the soy plantation, and then the column D is an API call to EarthBlocks to calculate what the biodiversity impact score is for each of those. And you can set that up so that it repeats. You can set it up once, but you can repeat it then over again for different locations or different time periods. But one of the key things is that API approach means that if you already have systems in place that are about analyzing your risk or your assets, that you can connect the API to that to make it a seamless link. It's not just another dashboard. Now it's very much a geospatial product that is at its heart, even though you can generate tables that are key numbers, so you can get an absolute metric, one key number out of it for the decision making. But the context is that in this example, looking at a mine in Brazil and quantifying the TNFD aligned assessment. So that's what in the demonstration I'm going to show you. I'm going to use a quarry in Malawi just as a fairly neutral example. But for any location-based asset, you can incorporate that in to do the sort of the identification, look at the sensitivity to the ecosystems, the ecosystem condition metrics such as the biodiversity intactness data set, and then looking at the dependencies and impacts on nature using that data. And then, of course, you want to be able to look at that ongoing. So a lot of the data sources that we have in EarthBlocks, a lot of those maps are being updated regularly. Okay, some of these maps are being updated every week. So you've got a capacity to once you've made a decision, you can monitor the ongoing effects to see if that was if it needs an intervention or a refresh in terms of the decisions that you made for that asset. What kind of assets are we talking about? Well, in general, that's entirely up to the user. Our users bring lots of different types of assets. This is one particular example looking at oil palm mills. And what you see here, the little bubble, if you see on the right-hand map, is that there's a little red dot in the center. That's actually the location of the mill. And what we've done is applied a buffer zone, so that what looks like a cloud around it where it's colored in. And the buffer zone there is based on travel time, because the oil palm fruit has a shelf life in terms of once it's picked and how long you've got until you get it to the mill, is that you can make a good estimate of the likely impact of that mill, because any oil palm plantations outside of that area are too far away in terms of travel time to get to that mill in time. And so what we do is you can take that boundary and you do the calculations in there in terms of a biodiversity impact score or ecosystem sensitivity score, and then you can score each of those assets. But importantly, you can scale that up. So in this example here, it's one workflow that's been repeated thousands of times. It's looking at, it can do that because we're processing it on the cloud. And we can run that as often as is required. So each of these colored dots here is another asset, and it's color coded based on the environmental and ecosystem risk factors that have been calculated in the platform. And just to note there, so Earthblocks is available on the Google Cloud Marketplace. So if you're already registered for a Google Cloud Marketplace, you can get Earthblocks through that. Now, one very quick example, we can't go into too much detail because we're still under an NDA with this global bank, but it was a global bank that was interested in looking at assessing thousands of assets. And they had a methodology in place that they wanted to use in terms of biodiversity indicators, but it was all desk-based and it was taking them a long time. So it was something that was in the region of months. And by looking at Earthblocks, they managed to get that down to a matter of hours. So the particular task that they were looking at used to take them 2 months to do, but it now just takes them an hour. And they also managed to add and increase the number of biodiversity indicators that they used in that model. One of the key things there in terms of control is that not only is Earthblocks fully transparent in terms of the methodologies, so that in this case, this global bank could apply their methodology within the platform and do their own calculations, but they were also able to do some of that in a secure context, so they didn't have to share their proprietary methodologies or data sources with us, because we provide a platform. We're not a consulting company, but what we do is provide the support and help to make sure that organizations like this global bank can get the results that they are aiming to achieve, and to do that in a secure and controlled manner. Right, let me move to the quick demonstration. So I'm going to stop sharing. Let me introduce you to the platform. So when you first come into the platform, you get into this place where that's called Explore. And what this is a collection of templates and example workflows that we've already set up. So you can explore a number of these. They're set up for our RED Plus projects. In this case, what I'm going to look at is reporting against TNFD in terms of a mining sector. I'm not going to go through all of these stages. So these are the different stages. That's the L3, L4, E3, and dependency measurement, and the E3 impact measurement in terms of the TNFD process, looking at the leap steps here. And the key thing is that if you open one of these, you get to I'll show you that in a minute. You get to something that looks like a dashboard. This is the boundary here of our area. So this is a quarry in Malawi. So I happen to choose Malawi because I do a lot of work in Malawi. I've done some teaching at the University of Mzuzu. And so I'm quite familiar with the area, and it's also relatively neutral. But I chose this quarry because it's what we can see is that actually it started just a couple of years ago. And so this boundary here, well, just to put it into context, so in this platform, this is the map interface. This is what a user that is only interested in the outputs might look at. We've got a time series here of Landsat data so that we can see right back to 2005 in terms of the land cover, and you can see that just as we get to 2023, it starts to turn yellow here instead of green. So it's been green for all this time, and that's when the quarry opened and they actually took off the land surface. Now, to put some context in here, because it's always important to look at the context, is that we can also look at the satellite imagery in the background. Excuse me. So we can put a base map in terms of different choices. One of the key data layers that we have is the NICFI data layer. So NICFI is the Planet Labs data that is at 5-meter resolution. And whereas this satellite imagery is very high quality, it helps us to put some context in here. I can turn off that layer so you can see the extent of the mine that I've drawn around here. Is that the NICFI data, you can actually put a time frame on that. So you have a choice of data going back to 2016. It's not quite as high quality as the Google Maps satellite data in the background, but you can actually look through the time period rather than or the historic time rather than just looking at the image of what it is now. Now, in terms of asset information, so if you've got just an X and Y coordinate for the center of an asset, you can upload that as into EarthBlocks. You can upload shapefiles or any other version of shapefiles, so you can add them and look at any number of different particular asset areas that you choose. I just looking at one just now, so we can focus in on what's happening. But what I want to do now is just quickly show you the workings, so the underneath, and the fact that if you're a user to EarthBlocks, you don't just see this dashboard, but you can actually see how it's created. And the novelty in terms of how the processes are done and the calculations are done on EarthBlocks is that we use this system of interconnecting blocks that have particular tasks. So if I zoom in a little bit here, we can see that this bluish block here is about bringing in data. So it's taking in Landsat data. So it's just a type of satellite data. You define which area that you're interested in, and you can select from the areas that are available on your list of areas. You can select the time period, so you can modify that. You don't have to look all the way back to 2005. You might just want to look at the last 10 years, for example. And then this green block here is about just visualizing it or generating tabulated output, which I'll show you in a second. And the idea is that there are, in our toolbox, there's about 32 of these different blocks, but they're the only 32 blocks that you need in order to do a huge range of applications, including looking at TNFD metrics. Not all of those metrics, but most of them that are directly related to geospatial data. But you can do a range of other analysis, and this working is all in the hands of the user. We provide some introductory blocks to get you started, but this can contain your own IP, or you're free to share your methodology with anybody that you choose. One of the important things, so Julie was mentioning that one of the tools that she worked with, getting the support from them was really important. So we've worked very hard at generating a help center which encapsulates a lot of that 125 years experience I was talking about, so that it really helps people get on the move with EarthBlocks. But the platform itself, in terms of each individual block, has things like About This Block, which gives you a direct link to a description of what each block does. And one of the other important things is that in terms of our data catalog, is that our data catalog is now well over 100 different data sets now. And for each of these data sets, what it comes with is a description of how you best use that data set. It will provide you with the where the data set's coming from, where it's hosted. If there's a publication, a scientific publication associated with that data set, we'll give you a link to that too. And we also give you the details of the license use. And so you can combine all of these data sets together. So there's over 100 data sets, and we keep adding new ones. So in fact, we added a new one yesterday, which if you saw the WRI and Meta, the map of canopy height around the world, we've been incorporated that into EarthBlocks already. So our users can start evaluating whether or not it meets their needs. But you can aggregate and bring all of these different data sets together. There are also commercial data sets. So Mvelo mentioned IBAT. So if you're already licensed user of IBAT, you can incorporate that into your version of the platform and use that seamlessly with all the other data sets. So this is that's the low floor. The high ceiling comes about because you can do much more elaborate processes. You can scale this up to many hundreds, if not thousands, of different asset values. For more advanced users, these blocks can become quite elaborate. So if I look at another example here, this is the dashboard view, where what we've got is we've got our indicator for the human impact on ecosystem integrity for our quarry. We've got land cover information historically, so that's what it looked like before, where this was all scrub. And then once it's mined, this gets classified as built area because it looks like stone, so it looks like it's city. And the biointactness score we can get on there as well. And all of that information is generated in tabular form or graphical form. So that's the land use change, where you can see a large amount of the shrub and scrub has been converted into the mining area, the red there. You can export all of this data as a CSV file or an image graphic to go into reporting documents. And in this particular workflow, so this is the TNFD core global disclosures metrics for mining. So we've got the water scarcity. So you can get the actual values out for that particular area: water scarcity, water withdrawal, wastewater discharge. So this has a lot of different metrics to the first example I gave. And if we look under the hood and actually see what's going on here, you see that it's got quite a number of workflows that are doing. So each of these is a different data set, allowing you to combine them all together into one analysis. Collaboration was also mentioned as an important thing, and it's one of the things that we are looking for now is key collaborators to help make sure that we shape this tool and the workflows that we build for people in a way that's actually going to help answer the questions that that you have. So please do get in touch with us if you've got an interest in trying out Earthblocks, or if you want to ask us about whether it meets any certain disclosure metrics criteria, and we're open for collaboration and discussion on that. And I'll stop there. So thanks very much for your attention.
Thank you, Ian. I think it's really, really insightful and exciting seeing a platform like Earthblocks and how, financial institutions in particular can practically begin using it. And I think taking a step back, throughout the last 90 minutes, we've had, the privilege of, getting some insights into the DBSA's methodology and how they resolve challenges that they faced. We had a view of the landscape review that ANCA commissioned, and that brought to the forefront the number of challenges relating to data, and how platforms such as Earthblocks are beginning to address that challenge. So thank you. Again, if anyone on the call, organizations would like to engage Earthblocks, please reach out to us. So we'll facilitate that connection. And by us, I mean the ANCA Secretariat, or anyone else on the panel, myself, Dorothy, or Osborne. And I'll just open it up to the floor for any questions before we close it off for today. I've noted one question here. I think this may be for Julie. Julie, if you're still around. There was a question here just asking whether the data that you, I think this was for Julie. I'll just double check with Teriro. So the question is, do you see this data for engagement processes with organizations you invest in, and how has this been helpful? So yeah, Julie, I don't know if you want to give that a stab. Terrio, just checking if this was indeed directed towards Julie. Julie? Oh, yes, it was towards
Should I
Julie.
go?
Yes. Yep, that was Tony.
Okay, so I just very briefly, when you look at the finance value chain, it's really important who you're receiving money from and who you're giving money to. So sometimes we are recipients of credit lines, sometimes we offer the credit line. So in one way, we are raising our bar and we're trying to help others that we're receiving from or giving onto to raise theirs. And it's a process where we're all helping each other to do this because none of us are perfect. We're all guilty of something somewhere, and we're all just trying to improve each other as fast as we possibly can. And then we have bigger clients who also manage programs, and this does help because we will ask very pointed questions to them about their impact and their influence. And so these kind of data assessments will be necessary for them wherever they can do it and as far down their journey they are.
Thank you, Julie. Great. I haven't noted any other questions, but I just wanted to, as we, prepare to close off, just to touch on a number of elements around the Nature Data Sources Working Group and how, we will be operating it. So one, I'll share in the chat box, and it was actually shared earlier on, a link that you can follow if you'd like to register your organization to join ANCA. But as part of the working groups, the only commitment is to be part of a monthly sort of joint working group meeting, and of course contribute to ANCA events and the likes, where you'll have access to speaking opportunities as well. We're really looking to galvanize our collective networks, knowledge, and expertise to advance the topic of nature globally. So with that being said, Dorothy, I don't know if you had any closing remarks just before we close it off for today.
No, just wanted to thank Ian from Earthblocks and Julie from DBSA for, being part of this. I know, it's taken quite a bit of your time, even just preparing. Thank you for being part of this, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. And Julie specifically, we're very proud of you as an ANCA member who came to us and said, you wanted to actually publish something and share your learnings. And ladies and gentlemen, that is the real purpose why we are here as ANCA, to support you, to support each other, to learn from each other, and of course, to make a difference within our continent. So thank you, Julie, and thank you for all the others who've actually also followed through and said they want to be more engaged and they want to participate in this type of, thought leadership or case studies going forward. So without much more, just want to wish you a good morning, evening, night, wherever you are. Maybe what you could do, I know there are one or two people who are not ANCA members. Please check out our website and do connect with all of us on LinkedIn. Ian has also shared his LinkedIn profile or LinkedIn contacts. Otherwise, all the best and enjoy yourselves.
Great. Thank you so much, Dorothy. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great day further and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.